So I'm going to talk about how we understand beliefs from a psychological perspective, and maybe this is going to be useful, I think, to communicating science, because we have a lot of potential inertia in beliefs, and so we want to change minds. And so understanding psychology, I think, can help us perhaps change minds in this perspective. So I want to start off with an example that I use to shock and befuddle undergraduates in one of my classes, and so I'm hoping that I can shock and befuddle you guys as well. And so here's a little story. Julie and Mark are sister and brother. They're traveling together in France for one summer vacation. One night, they're staying alone in a cabin, and they decide it'd be interesting and fun if they tried making love. Julie was already taking birth control pills, but Mark was using a condom too, just to be safe. They both enjoy making love, but they decide not to do it again. They keep that night as a special secret, which makes them feel even closer to each other. Was it okay for them to make love? Right? I asked this to my undergrads, and you can just see them squirming. About the third sentence, right? They're just like, this is really hard for folks, and probably you too, even you guys as well, thinking about this, thinking, this is just wrong, right? It's wrong. But why is it wrong? Okay? And I ask my students, why is it wrong? And they sit there and they sputter for a little while, like probably your brains are doing right now, sputtering. Why is it wrong? Well, it's wrong because there's genetic no, there can't be any genetic abnormalities here, right? We've eliminated that possibility. Well, but it's going to ruin their relationship no, we've eliminated it. Their relationship is fine, right? Well, what if somebody finds out? No, remote, deserted beach, nobody's finding out, right? So we've eliminated all possible rational explanations for why this is a problem. Okay, but it's still a problem, right? We have this belief that there's a problem with the situation, and we can't figure out a way to explain it, and it just really befuddles us. And this is a nice example of what's called belief-dependent realism in psychology. And this is the notion that we often start off with the belief, and then we create all of our explanations about that belief after the fact. Okay, we have a belief, we have some thought, some notion about the state of the world, and then we construct our reality around that, rather than using evidence that we gain from the reality and determining a belief from that. It's basically the opposite of the scientific method, right? And this is a common phenomenon. I'm guessing many of you probably were squirming a little bit with that example. So this isn't something that we just foist off onto the uneducated or the other side, whatever this side is, liberal, conservative. This is something that we all do all the time. Okay, it's actually a real problem in science as well. If you're interested in this idea, this book by Michael Shermer is a fantastic book about the believing brain. It's about why we believe the things we do, and it's a really neat look into dealing with a lot of the kind of nuances and biases, if you will, of the human brain and how that has to do with belief. So to give you another kind of quick example that some of you might also think about here, we also can think about how beliefs, like I said, this notion of belief-dependent realism suggests that we have a belief and we construct our reality around that. And that means that actually our beliefs can color our perceptions. Actually, how we perceive the world depends on what we believe to begin with, which is a pretty crazy thing to think about, but it happens all the time. Just ask Christopher Columbus, right? He thought he was in one place, he was in a completely different place, but it completely construed how he viewed where he was. Okay, and one of these nice examples of this is this notion of sugar causes hyperactivity, right? This is kind of a very common belief, especially if you have kids, all right, that sugar causes this. There's no evidence whatsoever that sugar actually causes hyperactivity, none at all, okay? But we have this belief, and what's really interesting is if you go and they've done this great controlled experiment where you take a set of mothers, tell them you're giving their kid something with sugar in it, and then have them go play in a playground, right? You take another group of mothers, tell them that your kid has some sugar-free placebo candy or drink or whatever, go play with the others. The mother who thinks that their kid had sugar will rate their hyperactivity much higher than the mom who won't, okay? They actually see more hyperactivity based on their preconceived notion that sugar causes hyperactivity. Okay, so this is a really common phenomenon, and so understanding this idea that when beliefs come first, we construct our reality is, I think, a really useful way of thinking about things, and is really useful for how to change minds, especially when the beliefs are wrong. Another very tightly linked notion is the idea that beliefs also affect our beliefs, right? We have this kind of perpetual cycle of our beliefs affecting our beliefs. And this is called confirmation bias in the psychology literature. And this is basically the idea that we just look for information that confirms what we already believe. Okay, this is the confirmation bias. We're constantly looking for things that just support what we already have, our hypotheses. And any scientists out here, right? Does anybody do this? No, we don't do that. We're scientists. We're completely objective, right? We look for disconfirming evidence and we're neutral. No, we're testing, we have a hypothesis. We're looking to test that hypothesis and confirm that hypothesis despite Popper. And there are two main ways that this happens. One is just a passive way, right? Which is basically this idea that we ignore or devalue information that contradicts our initial belief. Okay, we just ignore it. And this is really interesting because there's nice work in memory, right? We tend to forget things that don't agree with our hypotheses more than we forget things that do agree, right? So the beliefs are affecting our actual memories themselves. Okay, we just ignore, we devalue, we forget things that aren't in line with our own perspective. But there's also active confirmation and this is, I think, where the scientists come in, right? We seek information to confirm our beliefs. We actually go out and look for that information more than we look for disconfirming information or anything like that, right? We actively look for things, for information, for evidence to support our own view and don't specifically look for evidence to support other views or disconfirming evidence for our own view. Okay, so beliefs affect our beliefs, but also stories affect our beliefs. We really are highly susceptible to anecdotes. We really like hearing neat stories, right? Even if they are anecdotes, they are stories. They're one-off, right? They're not necessarily causal. There's not really scientific information, evidence in there. It's just one-off beliefs. We love hearing stories, right? And I think the politicians take full advantage of this. In every political debate, right, you're going to hear about, well, when I was in the XYZ city and meeting with the steelworkers, old good buddy Joe there came and told me about his problem he had, right? This is a constant phenomenon in what politicians do. They grab anecdotes, particular individuals. What's key is they like to use specifics to try to make things concrete, right? So, of course, we have Donald Trump here saying that just the other day, which evidence is actually he told the same story 2 years ago, but just the other day, right, he ran into one of his people, okay, who had a beautiful child, so we're already now envisioning this beautiful child, right? We have this specific notion, this beautiful child who had a vaccine and became very sick, right? Tremendous fever, more details, right? We're seeing this poor suffering child now in our minds, okay? And then, boom, now is autistic, so voila, right? We have a direct link. Donald Trump told us we have a direct link between vaccines and autism now, okay? We're highly susceptible to these. These types of vivid details really suck us in and help influence our beliefs. And then, of course, going back to confirmation bias, we're looking then for more evidence like this to kind of fit the beliefs. And we ignore all the thousands and thousands of other kids who got vaccines, got fevers, and didn't get autism, okay? It all kind of feeds together there. Also, just the frequency of information in our world influences our beliefs. Okay, and this is called availability bias. So this is a really kind of classic study. I've updated one of them slightly. They didn't have selfies back in 1978. This is just data that came out a few weeks ago that maybe you guys have seen. Right, so these are kind of paired up. So what's more likely to cause death in the U.S., selfies or shark attacks? Well, if you saw the news a few weeks ago, 12 people died of selfies and 8 died of shark attacks. So a little bit, despite the fact that this year, all you heard about in the summer was shark attacks. Stay away from the Carolinas. It's just filled with sharks, right? Okay. Diabetes or homicide, right? What do you hear about on the news? You hear about the homicide death. You don't hear about the folks dying of diabetes. Tornadoes and lightning, the same thing. All at once, lots of people die by tornadoes. Lightning strikes fewer people spread out, but over the whole year. Accidents, colon cancer. Okay, this is more people, of course, die of colon cancer than accidents. So this is really surprising for folks often, because you don't hear about the other things, right? They're not available in your environment. So just this hearing things and hearing them over and over again makes you pay more attention to that and integrate it into your belief system more. So the good news actually about this is repeated exposure influences belief, right? This is good. That means we can go out there and get information out to folks repeatedly. And that's treated as, that people integrate that into their belief system. The bad thing is repeated exposure influences belief. And so that means that repeated misinformation has the same problem, right? This stuff is just coming at folks. They're hearing, every time we get the news story about people talking about links between vaccine and autism, just bringing that forward, integrates into people's minds that, oh, maybe there is a link, right? I've heard this over and over again. Another, I think, nice example of this more recently on kind of a very different topic is, you guys have seen all the silly commercials in the Super Bowl where they have chimpanzees doing ridiculous things in costumes, right? While this is hilarious and we think this is entertaining, there's actually a real problem with that, which is people who see these commercials think that chimpanzees aren't endangered, right? Surely if Hollywood has enough of them that they can make these crazy GoDaddy commercials with 1,000 chimpanzees dressed up like workers in an office, right? Then it must be fine. So just kind of seeing the repeated nature of this changes their belief structure. And so they don't realize the real endangered situation that these animals are in. Another thing that's actually really important is where we start. Starting points matter for beliefs. And this is called anchoring and adjustment in the literature. So here's an example. It's kind of a ridiculous example, right? This is really tough questions here. Was Leonardo da Vinci born before or after 1952? Or before or after 300 BC? Okay, very, very easy answers we can start off with. But then we follow it up with this one. In what year was Leonardo da Vinci born? I won't embarrass anyone here. Well, the crazy thing is, those anchors, like where you initially start, even though they're both ridiculous on either end of the scale, shapes what people's project estimates are. Okay, so they anchor on these endpoints and adjust rather than coming up with their own kind of perspective and going from there. Okay, you can do the same thing with a blue whale. I can ask, is a blue whale 1 kilometer long, or greater or less than 1 kilometer, or 0.2 meters? And they get that one. Then you ask them what the length of a whale is, and they're like, maybe it's about 0.5 kilometer long. I don't know. Okay, so these, just in case you're wondering, 1452. So these things matter. Where we start really matters. We kind of take this as initial starting points and adjust from there, and that has important influences in our decision making. So to kind of wrap things up here, I just wanted to make it clear that this is a really important concept, just in life in general, actually, thinking to yourself when you're questioning your own beliefs and thinking about where do these beliefs come from, which actually we'll hear more about sources of beliefs, I think, from Dan next, but that we kind of start with the belief and then we construct our reality around that, and that's a real interesting phenomenon that's useful for science communication. Facts alone don't cure misinformation. This is, especially in the political forum, we find this, right? This is, I think, a really interesting notion. One thing that can help, so I've kind of raised some of the issues, but some of the things that can help here are the idea that just forcing people to think about the other perspective, saying, imagine that you're completely wrong. I know it's really hard for a lot of folks, but imagine you're completely wrong. Right? Come up with reasons why you might be wrong and what the right answer might be or what another perspective might be. That actually helps kind of de-bias folks in some ways. Personalizing that situation, so taking those anecdotes, bringing things to people as individuals helps get around some of these issues as well. But in general, especially for adults, changing minds is hard. It's really hard. And so I think the key thing here is, like, given this perspective, we need to shape those initial beliefs. And this is where I think, I hate to say it's a lost cause trying to do adult education here, but I think working with kids and kind of keeping that going on is, I think, where we're at the moment. And it's really difficult otherwise to change minds once they're already set. And I'll stop there. Thank you.